Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you had your lunch and refreshed to commence the next session. We'll now begin the fourth technical session on Defense and Strategic Studies for the 14th International Research Conference under the theme Techno-Strategic Studies. We have 5 researchers joining with us today to share their views and opinions on the conference theme. This will be a captivating and delightful session. Ladies and gentlemen, this session will be chaired by Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa, the Country Manager, United Nations Human Settlement Program for Sri Lanka and Maldives. Now, I would like to call upon Brigadier R.G. Rajapaksha, RSP, PSc, the Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies of General Sir John Kothalawa Defence University, to introduce the chairperson for the session, Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa. Over to you, sir.
Distinguished invitees, students of General Sir John Kothalawa Defence University, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor, I welcome you all to the Defense and Strategic Studies Technical Session 4 of the KDU International Research Conference 2021, in which the presenters will deliver their papers on the sub-theme Techno-Strategic Communication. It is my pleasure to introduce the chairperson of the session, Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa, Director General, Foreign Ministry, to the audience. Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa obtained his PhD in Politics and International Studies from the University of Cambridge, United Kingdom. During his doctoral studies, he has been awarded the Cambridge Commonwealth Trust Scholarship, Developing World Education Fund Scholarship, and SMUT Scholarship in Commonwealth Studies. He has also obtained MPhil in Politics and International Studies from University of Cambridge, recipient of the British Chewning Scholarship, MA in IR, MBA, MDA, MDS, and BSc degrees from University of Colombo, and has completed postgraduate diploma in marketing and is an attorney at law. Dr. Thalpahewa has been a visiting lecturer at University of Colombo, University of California, American National College, Bandaranaike Center for International Studies, Bandaranaike International Diplomatic Training Institute, and Command and Staff College, Sapugaskanta. An outstanding sportsman, he captained Sri Lanka rowing, has won medals at South Asian Games, and currently holds 2 Sri Lankan records. An officer of the Sri Lankan Foreign Service. He came first in the country at the Sri Lanka Foreign Service recruitment examination. He has served in the Sri Lankan missions in the United States, the Maldives, Turkey, and the United Kingdom, and also has served as the head of agency/country program manager of United Nations Human Settlement Program, UN Habitat, for Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Currently, he is serving as a Director General in the Foreign Ministry. He has authored Peaceful Intervention in the Intra-State Conflicts, Norwegian Involvement in the Sri Lankan Peace Process, Ashgate, UK 2015, and Routledge, UK 2016, and co-authored a quick guide to the plants in the Maldives, that is in print. While thanking him for being here with us today online, accepting our invitation, now I cordially invite Dr. Chanaka to chair the Defense and Strategic Studies Technical Session 4. Meantime, I'd like to call upon our eminent guest speakers in this session, some physically and some online. Dr. Major PADACS Jayathilaka joining online, Mr. BJ Perera joining online, Miss SUW Jayaratne joining physically, Mr. A. Ariyapperuma joining online, Miss RMS Veronika joining online. Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa will also introduce the presenters of the session to the audience. Dr. Chanaka, sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Brigadier. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who joined the fourth technical session of the 14th International Research Conference under the theme Safety, Stability, and National Development in the New Normal, organized by the Kotalala Defense University. The theme for today's session, this particular session, is Techno-Strategic Communication. Now, if you look at the theme itself, today we are in the fourth industrial revolution. Now, it's characterized by the fusion of the digital, biological, and physical worlds, and the growing utilization of new technologies, such as artificial intelligence, cloud computing, robotics, 3D printing, the Internet of Things, and advanced wireless technologies, among others. There's a plethora of new technologies coming every day. So you can see that not only the future of work, not only our workplace, but almost every aspect of our lives will be driven by technology. So we are in the age of machines, and we are all learning. Every day we are learning, improving our learning, how to race with them rather than against them. Now, the best example is today's session. We are having it online. Last year I was there physically. Many presenters were there, some were not there. But 10 years ago, could we even assume or envisage that we can hold a whole session, a technical session, or even a conference online where people access from remote locations? So therefore, it's important that we understand and exploit the fast-moving, non-stop, what I would call brave new world of communications. Now, when you come to strategic communication, it's a term now used more widely to describe the increasing sophisticated communications activities undertaken by a wide range of organizations. These can be governments, multinationals, universities, political parties, NGOs, non-profit organizations, research institutions, think tanks, all sorts of entities. Now, Christopher Paul, in his book, Strategic Communication Origins, Concepts and Current Debates, Contemporary Military Strategic and Security Issues, defines strategic communications as a set of coordinated actions, messages, images, and other forms of signaling or engagement intended to inform, influence, or persuade selected audiences to support national objectives. I think that's a very valid definition. That's why I picked it up for today's session. Now, we have been talking about strategic communication, but I also like to mention about the unstrategic communication, which in Sri Lanka we are quite familiar with. Now, this is practiced by so many organizations. For example, firing of press releases or chasing sound bites or photo opportunities to quote publicity for publicity's sake. Now, these actions, I would say, are undisciplined, unfocused, and is a scattergun or a firefighting approach, which will not produce the desired results. Therefore, now it is opportune that we discuss the ways and means of using techno-strategic communication in addressing our national issues. I think to some extent we are contributing towards that during today's session. In this regard, we are fortunate to have 5 very interesting and topical presentations. These range from building a virtual military force for national security, stability, and development of Sri Lanka to the use of artificial intelligence in national security to countering propaganda from LTTE as well as ISIS, and to ensuring service delivery and quality management in the health sector in the country under the new normal conditions. Now, meanwhile, I like to pose a few points to ponder. These are not questions I'm raising, because the presenters are going to present and then there will be a question and answer session after that. But I like to raise some, not issues, some points where you can think, can actually a machine replace a human? Because many of you are in the military. Hasn't there been situations where you have acted successfully on what is called the intuition? Perhaps in critical situation of life and death, than actually going by the book. Then can only algorithms successfully address issues where humans are also involved? Then are we becoming slave to technology when it should be the other way around? And finally, I like to also, another point I like to raise is, What would happen if the predicted effect of the solar superstorms that could cause catastrophic effect on IT include internet, outages covering the entire earth and lasting several months? It's called the internet apocalypse. Then are we putting all eggs in one basket? So I'm trying to, for academics, it's a critical thinking process, think out of the box. So all in all, we have, like I said, we have 5 presenters, and I think everybody is given 10 minutes. I'm sure the organizers will ring a bell, and then there will be a question and answer session after that. Then I'll do my summing up. Now, I would do like to apologize. There are some military officers who will be presenting, and because I have only the names, so please bear with me. I'll just introduce by telling the initials and the name. Gender is also not given, so please bear with me. I'll just mention the name and invite the presenters to speak. So the first paper will be on building a virtual military force for national security, stability and development of Sri Lanka, presented by PADACS Jayathilaka and RMS Veronika. Over to the presenters.
Academia and fellow researchers, let me convey my appreciation to the conference chair for the comprehensive introduction about me. Let me present building a virtual military force for the national security, stability and development of Sri Lanka to this august gathering, please. The human affairs have grown over past 3 centuries vibrantly with the invention of the internet and World Wide Web and its impact on virtual revelation. The global virtual colonization directs the tech giants to complete themselves to power lift in data collection and processing powers to digitally weaponize to deter the geopolitical influences. Sri Lanka, confronting with multidimensional, should consider in building a virtual military capability and its related strategy. Therefore, this paper was focused to explore the novel interpretations for building a virtual military force for the national security, stability, and development of Sri Lanka. The world tech giants possesses a large-scale virtual combat power, instrumenting the national power in informational strategy in compared to other states. These realities are producing security threats in global economic, social, and governance. Ladies and gentlemen, I display here the arguments of 2 great military strategists on the application of the ideal war and real war. The Sri Lanka military force is confident at projecting a kinetic military operations, yet with the informational combat power. The projection of the equal levels of competencies will only be possible to fight a real war in Sri Lankan soil. As indicated in the diagram, the world tech giants possesses a large-scale virtual combat power, instrumenting the national power in informational strategy, developed in bond of massive civilian technology enterprises in compared to other states. Further, I suggest the following model, the triple loop learning solution model for Sri Lanka military, where it depicts the militaries must re-imagine the learning strategies in changing the functions, forms, and logics of modern warfare. Further, it illustrates the Sri Lanka military's decisiveness of winning the humanitarian war to deal with the multifarious solving of problems demands by virtual war. The aim, scope, focus, and the significance of the study are as follows. building a virtual military is a strategic long-term decision that requires high level of evidence for research, and knowledge transfer. The study was conducted in a qualitative approach in reviewing of 64 research papers by meta-synthesis method, followed by meta-thematic analysis and critical imperative analysis selected from 478 related papers by 100 papers in full content review. The study finds the following vital results and analysis in meta-synthesis method, followed by a meta-thematic synthesis and critical imperative analysis by a statistical data analysis from the questionnaire on building a virtual military force for national security, stability, and development of Sri Lanka. The following main categories of complementary findings are further discussed for building a virtual military force for armed forces of Sri Lanka. The research introduces a vital concept of designing a virtual military arms room to cater new military learning challenge. It includes software management and extreme data processing, our latest weaponry that virtual soldiers should employ on battle. The study also identifies that the new domain in virtual battle drills can be developed through by executing digital functions using daily by soldiers. Digital military weapon rack services advances in categorizing and indexing of all available and new virtual weapon bundles assessed by soldiers with virtual scenarios via command and wearables to receive artificial intelligence assisted recommendations for employable virtual weapons. The synthetic battle immunity system is a concept in protecting men in virtual battlefield in design parameters of human immunity system. The study identifies that it is a construct of 3-layer protection system, conceptually bears 3-digit layers of battle protection for combat survivability in modern battlefields. Sri Lankan military commanders can project training atmospheres for real soldiers in net wars programs by using remote interactive military training that have an array of choices in terms of industrial, artificial intelligence platforms, as I have indicated here, and that can be used to develop and train virtual military arm rooms. This primary theoretical framework is constructed directly based on the extracted concepts and categories. Theory building for meta-synthesis method creates a promote and current knowledge and executive analysis of key research findings. As illustrated, the national security, stability, and development can be achieved by an effective and efficient military modernization of Sri Lanka and bring out basic conceptual interpretations related to the study. The study was basically charged with the modernization of the military into a subsection of virtual military in aimed for unveiling such phenomenological concepts should involve in building a virtual military force. Coming into the conclusion, the findings of the study are discussed that train and employ a new versatile military force that able to fight with a multi-weaponry in the domain of war as a challenge in front. Finally, study contributes future research possibilities in novel interpretations to design a virtual military force for the national security, stability, and development of Sri Lanka by considering the factors related in this study. Ladies and gentlemen, here I display some of the vital references of the study. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jayathilaka, and my sincere apologies to you and Ms. Veronika because I did not, by an oversight, did not introduce you all properly. So as you all will be presenting the fifth paper, I will do the introduction when we do the fifth paper. The next presentation is on Digital Minds into National Security, Artificial Intelligence for Threat Analysis by Mr. B.J. Perera. Now, Mr. Bodhana Perera is an independent researcher engaged in the field of national security studies, intelligence and strategic studies. He received his bachelor's degree in social science from the Open University of Sri Lanka. He is currently reading for his master's in science in security and strategic studies from the General Sir John Kotalawala University, Sri Lanka. He possesses experience in the domains of cybersecurity, telecommunications, finance, and national security, being employed in a number of reputed companies and agencies. The author currently serves as a research assistant at the Institute of National Security Studies. Over to you, Mr. Perera.
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair and my fellow presenters. I would like to present my research on digital minds, international security, artificial intelligence for threat analysis. Let me share screen. Right. Starting on with my presentation, I would like to introduce this concept of artificial intelligence. I basically introduced myself into this topic of research because of the shortcomings that we have observed during the past couple of decades in the cyberspace and also in national security related threat analysis mechanisms. So moving on, I started my research based on two special incidents that took place in the same year, 2019. So in 2019, we observed an attack on government websites. Majorly, somewhere around 13 government websites were hacked by a group called the Tamil Eelam Cyber Force, which was motivated by the Liberation Tigers or Tamil Eelam. And also, there was another group of hackers called Silence, which attacked banking systems in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India, and Kyrgyzstan. So in both these incidents, we were caught unaware. We heard of the attacks, or we realized that we were attacked soon after these attacks had taken place. So it brought on the conception that Sri Lanka was not ready in the cyberspace. Also, there were several incidents where we have been caught off guard in the cyberspace and also in the domain of national security, where now in the context of the Tamil Eelam Cyber Force attacking Sri Lanka's cyber domain, depicted that Sri Lanka was vulnerable in the cybersecurity domain in terms of national security, because all of the websites that were targeted were mainly government websites relating to major ministries, information agencies, and also private and public partnerships. And silence hacking into the banking system of Sri Lanka depicted that the financial sector and also our financial intelligence agencies were being majorly targeted by groups. Silence basically targeted us on the financial aspect, but there were several other incidents where banking systems have been hacked, and we got to know them later. We do have a stern cybersecurity monitoring mechanism, but also it is conducted by humans, giving room for human error. So moving on to identifying the necessities of cybersecurity artificial intelligence, I understood there were three key necessities. One of them being excessive resource utilization. It requires a lot of manpower, technology, and infrastructure to monitor a lot of these threats that are coming our way. So the foresight and the capability to see a lot of threats in the domain of cybersecurity, financial security, and national security are minimized due to the limitation of capacity that we have in Sri Lanka. And secondly, moving on with the time management issue, there would be a lot of time management constraints when it comes to the utilization of resources and human intelligence, because we have to utilize a lot of people to get one thing certainly found out, or else we can use a limited number of people, which consumes a lot of time, which in turn creates confusion, because most of the information that we find in time would lose its validity or its importance with time. And moving on, the current threat analysis methodology in Sri Lanka is conducted by specially trained or skilled individuals who are specially trained in the art of intelligence. So this model is evolving rapidly, but according to standards in the world, where we have seen a lot of artificial intelligence modules have been implied or implemented in the world, this would be a drawback in terms of national security, seeing us moving at a slower pace. And the third necessity I recognized in my study was that there was an increasing demand for the current statistical analysis methodologies, because the current methodology that we have adopted is efficient, but operationally it requires more efficiency, and it lacks the capability to apply itself dynamically on different realms. For an instance, if there is a cyber attack, you should be able to follow it up with the physical domain, which is not presently available in Sri Lanka. Even though it is available, it requires a lot of time. So moving on, the research problems that I've identified in this was the observation that there was a manual threat recognition methodology in the current MO of the National Security Threat Analysis Mechanism. And it was identified by potential threat groups as a loophole which they could have exploited. And also, moving on with the lack of multi-domain predictive threat analysis methodology for Sri Lanka was another loophole that was exploited by all these interested entities. And also, Sri Lanka currently possesses an average preparedness for future threats. And also, if a threat escalates in the domains, I specifically focused on 3 domains: in the cybersecurity domain, financial security domain, and in the defense and security realms. If a threat is escalated, it requires to go through a lot of layers. But this process takes a lot of time. So to cut that off, there were several instances where we have developed certain platforms which allows the information to pass through all the layers simultaneously without having the involvement of human intelligence, or let's say humans or skilled individuals. So I observed and practiced a qualitative method for the research, and I went through about 15 papers based on artificial intelligence, regionally, internationally, and country-specific papers. And also I followed up with observations, qualitative data gathered through focus groups, and interviewing a lot of people who have been engaged in the intelligence and threat analysis domains. Now, moving on to the current applications of artificial intelligence in Sri Lanka, we identified several platforms which utilized similar platforms to artificial intelligence, but they were basically running on neural engines and algorithms specialized in identifying threat groups. So we have 3 specified algorithms that are running in the Department of Immigration and Immigration, and in the Credit Information Bureau, simply known as CRIB, and in the Financial Intelligence Unit of the Central Bank. So having to work in in a domain where telecommunication and financial intelligence was involved, I had first-hand experience noticing how information was not passed on to the relevant agencies in time. There were incidents where financial, basically fraud and financial miscalculations were detected, but unfortunately, by the time they were escalated, the involved individuals or the people who have been really behind those crimes have had the opportunity, they had a window of time to escape. So that importance of information was not credibly passed on. So in this process, if an AI was there, so my study basically rested on the shoulder where an AI could mitigate all these issues, where time management and escalation of necessary information, or else to take necessary action or to identify the threat, would be done through an AI, where an AI could basically understand and calculate the level of the threat or the magnitude of the threat, and it could easily escalate it to the necessary agencies. For an instance, the Department of Immigration and Immigration utilizes of software basically that runs through all the visa applications, which analyzes and cross-references all these applications against international criminal and investigative databases, where basically Scotland Yard, FBI's, and CIA's information databases are accessed through real time. And if there's a potential threat that is coming towards Sri Lanka, it notifies the necessary agencies, specifically the Department of Immigrations and the Ministry of Defense if necessary. It has the capability to do that. But when it comes to humans, we have understood that humans take a lot of time. They have to go through protocol, they have to sometimes go through the layers, and also they have to sometimes calculate the threat, whether this is an actual threat or not. But when it comes to an algorithm or a statistical platform, it would have the necessary capability to analyze whether this is an actual threat or not, given the statistics that are available. But the doubt factor that is available in the human brain or the human consciousness is not available through artificial intelligence. That is an edge I have recognized in the utilization of artificial intelligence. Moving on, artificial intelligence was applied. This data was extracted from an Israeli paper written from the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel. So in this platform, they have suggested that they should require a national security related threat recognition database. And also in this database, they require an artificial intelligence platform to identify potential threats, analyzing through the data that is available through their database. Now, in this, they have recognized several sectors, specifically 8 sectors, where they could successfully utilize artificial intelligence to pre-recognize and predict potential threats. And in this, they have realized that this application, in the paper itself, they exclaim that this application would far exceed the human capacity of recognizing threats, because this could function real time. And also, this does not have the physical limitations of a human being, where a human being can only focus on one thing for over 90 minutes and his brain or his thinking patterns would align with the same objective. Whereas artificial intelligence does not have rational thought, but it only possesses logical calculation mechanisms, where it does not have the cognitive sense of sentiment. And also, in the areas such as banking and finances, it would allow this artificial intelligence platform to personalize its services. For a fact, if financial fraud is present, if a person tries to deposit an amount whom has previous records in financial fraud, it would initially escalate all the necessary agencies. But when it comes to financial fraud, now in the case of Sakpiti Rana Singha, we have observed that it took a lot of time for the agencies to observe this. Now, if there were any incidents where that involved financial crime, a small string of data could lead to a certain exploration or the revelation of a threat that is impeding towards national security. So that sense was brought out in this study, that artificial intelligence would be a suitable replacement in place of human threat recognition protocols that are available in Sri Lanka. Now, moving on to the modern applications of artificial intelligence for threat analysis, I've recognized several agencies have been utilizing these platforms, even though we did not consider them to be artificial intelligence platforms. The FBI, CIA, Mossad, KGB, the Russians, the Chinese, all of them have been using cybersecurity related or national security related threat recognition AIs for so long. And we have seen in several movies also that that these sort of threat recognition platforms are there, but it was highly doubtable whether they existed in actual form. But in the study, I realized that there were several platforms which are used to a certain extent in the context of Sri Lanka, but most of the time we are lagging behind when it comes to cross-platform voice and image recognition, facial recognition, data statistical analysis, and specifically in biometric and DNA recognition, data monitoring and alerting, and everything. So in this sense, Sri Lanka requires a lot of development. Now, for an example, if there were biometrics and image and voice recognition AIs that were available in Sri Lanka before the attack of Zaran Hashim, well, by the time, for an instance, if there were existing platforms which were linked to all the information databases in Sri Lanka,
Bodhana, can you please conclude? You have exceeded the time given.
Yes, sir. Yes, yes. So if so, coming on to the point, if there were certain systems in Sri Lanka, there could have been a huge possibility of recognizing all these people because they were already in our databases. So coming to that, it is imperative that we should consider this concept of implementing national security related AI in the national security domains of Sri Lanka. And suggestively, it is ideal that we should implement these artificial intelligence platforms or algorithms or neural engines in the financial sector, the cyberspace, and monitoring centers. Specifically, we should implement the thought of processing a data center where we should monitor all the data transactions in Sri Lanka, and also for the Ministry of Defense, intelligence-wise, national security-related threat-wise, and also in terms of deep analysis of cases, we should always suggest and we should consider the thought of introducing an artificial intelligence system. With the restraints of time, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I would like to draw your attention to Eliza Yudovsky's quote. By far, the greatest danger of artificial intelligence is that people conclude too early that they understand it. As Sri Lankans, we have not understood the capabilities and the potentials AI could bring into the realms of national security and the security of the cyber and financial domains. I suggest by this research that we should give a considerable thought of implementing such mechanisms to better develop and secure national security in Sri Lanka. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Perera, for that interesting and informative presentation. Now, the third paper that will be presented is on non-kinetic next generation terrorism in post-conflict Sri Lanka, importance of countering double front propaganda from LTTE and ISIS. The presenter is Ms. SUW Jayaratne. Ms. Sindhuja Umandi Vikramasinghe Jayaratne is currently working as a lecturer in General Sir John Kothawala Defence University, teaching political science, terrorism, violent extremism, and intelligence to undergraduate and postgraduate students. Also, she is a PhD candidate in KDU focusing on countering violent extremism in the wake of nationalism. She obtained MSc Strategic Studies from Nanyang Technological University, Singapore, and BSc International Relations from University of London, that's London School of Economics and Political Science. She has also completed the Certificate in Terrorism Studies from S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, that's in Singapore. Prior to her current position, she has been working as an intelligence analyst in Sri Lanka. Ms. Sindhuja was also a student research assistant in S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore, conducting research on violent extremism and counterterrorism. She also possesses 6 years of working experience in the humanitarian sector, contributing to the reconciliation and rehabilitation process during the post-conflict era in Sri Lanka. Now I call upon Ms. Jayaratne to make a presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Chair, am I audible?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my presentation is on non-kinetic next generation terrorism in post-war Sri Lanka, looking at importance of countering double front propaganda from LTTE and ISIS. So Sri Lanka defeated one of the most ruthless terrorist organizations in the world. Although Sri Lankan security forces defeated the LTTE on Sri Lankan soil, its international network remains intact. The international network of the LTTE and engaged propaganda and fundraising, then procurement and shipping has transformed, then masquerading as human rights activists. The former terrorist supporters today engage in lobbying, litigation, and lawmaking, which has now become a threat to Sri Lanka. So on the other hand, organizations such as ISIS have changed their modus operandi to articulate regional hubs while making the Islamist extremists mutually inclusive through continuous propaganda and recruitment in these regions. Therefore, online propaganda mechanisms contribute to motivate lone wolves, homegrown elements, new recruitments, and sympathizers to such kind of organizations. The Easter Sunday attack is a classic example of how ISIS ideology inspired a group of young Muslims to carry out a massive attack in Sri Lanka, killing at least 250 civilians. Within such context, this research looks at the transformation of national security threats from kinetic to non-kinetic in the present-day context and the importance of countering double-front propaganda from LTTE and ISIS. So this research is conducted to understand why propaganda war is considered as a national security threat to Sri Lanka, to understand the existing counter-strategy related to non-kinetic terrorist tactics in Sri Lanka, and also to understand the necessity to identify double front propaganda war as a critical vulnerability in national security. Then, this research intends to discover responses to the following questions. Why propaganda war is considered as a national security threat to Sri Lanka? Then, what is the existing strategy to counter non-kinetic terrorist tactics such as propaganda war related to Sri Lanka? Why it is necessity to identify double front propaganda war as a critical vulnerability to national security. So, Sri Lanka is now experiencing an altered form of violence to separatism, and it has pushed the diverse societies towards ethno-religious polarization. Meanwhile, materials like Voice of Hind, which started to propagate the ideologies of Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which is also known as ISIS, in February 2020, has encouraged potential Muslim individuals to embrace violent extremism as a means to their goals, especially in South Asia. Online propaganda mechanisms such as Voice of Hind, Greenbird Telegram Channel, Amak Media Center constantly provide the necessary ideological support to gather scattered Islamist extremists to function through regional cooperation under specific regional coordination and leadership. Not only ISIS, but also Wolves of Manhattan magazine, which is published by the pro-Al-Qaeda Jaish al-Malham al-Electroni, encourages lone wolf attacks with Bitcoin rewards. Then on the other hand, the remnants of the LTTE in overseas within Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora community are accusing the Sri Lankan government against war crimes committed during 30 years of war, especially referring to Elam War 4. Even if the allegations against Sri Lanka are baseless, the network of the Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora have achieved substantial recognition for their grievances from international community. with UNHRC resolution and recent bills in Parliament in Ontario, and also in New South Wales and Toronto, depicts the success of disinformation campaigns and misinformation campaigns spearheaded by LTTE fronts such as Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam, Global Tamil Forum, Canadian Tamil Congress, British Tamil Forum, and Australian Tamil Congress. Furthermore, the propagation that there was a genocide in Sri Lanka disseminated by LTTE front organizations distort the history of the country, unfortunately. So, Facebook pages such as Telebri claims to post on Tamil culture, Tamil history, Tamil archaeology, etc. However, the page also disseminates information and misinformation through multiple videos on their Facebook page. The page also includes posts on Black July remembrance. The Facebook page is also linked to a website called www.telebri.com, which holds a plethora of articles on Tamil culture and history. However, upon further observation, it was revealed that amidst the cultural context, the website also circulates posts honoring LTTE terrorists, including the Black Tigers. Another observation is that the Facebook page and website have continually attempted to create a narrative that the war was between Sinhala army and the Tamil people. There is this is evident in an article titled Silent Terrorism at Anandapuram, which is an article honoring LTTE terrorists, where it mentions that the Sinhala troops and Sinhala nation attempts to destroy Tamil homeland. However, threat of propagation by the LTTE front organizations in overseas was seen as a peripheral threat, mutually coincide with the events, perceptions occurring in the core. This is only one example that I have got. So there are many websites, many social media accounts actually sharing such kind of information. So now we come to double front information war. According to the diagram depicted, propaganda which is disseminated by Islamist extremists and LTTE front organizations in the periphery simultaneously add to radicalization process of two different minorities in Sri Lanka, that is Tamils and the Muslims. However, the nature of propagation and its effects are not the same due to its difference in the ultimate goal of these two different fronts. LTTE front organizations are claiming for vengeance and for a separate state, while the Islamist extremists call for a global jihad and creation of the caliphate. Yet both the propagations shake the foundation of peace and harmony in Sri Lankan society due to the direct and indirect repercussions formulating from the radicalization of like-minded individuals who embrace such propagation. However, the national security apparatus in the process of fighting a new war, that is propaganda war, with old tactics, that is conventional approaches in warfare. There is a miscalculation of the center of gravity of the new opponent, and mostly the conventional counter strategies appear to be ad hoc than implementation of a systematic approach to fight against the new enemy. This explains the disparity of actual threat perception to countermeasures which have been applied by the security apparatus in Sri Lanka in the post-war context. Due to the gap of identifying critical vulnerabilities, we normally call them as CV, then critical capabilities, that is CC, and critical requirements, CR, relates to the new threat of information war mounting from two different fronts. The counterterrorism approaches have become stagnated and paralyzed in holding the continuous pressure of new manners of disinformation and misinformation sprouted by two different fronts. In that case, it is important for Sri Lanka to first identify propaganda war as a threat to national security, then align to the critical vulnerability of propaganda war in Sri Lanka and it needs to calculate its existing critical capabilities. If the critical capabilities are not sufficient to address the identified critical vulnerabilities, finally, it is important to recognize the critical requirements to address this issue. These metrics help to identify the issue and to fix the gap in the existing counter-terrorism measures. In conclusion, or in nutshell, this, I would like to say, Sri Lanka is exposed to two different fronts of propaganda war mounting from violent extremist actors and pro-LTTE elements. However, Sri Lanka lacks in a comprehensive strategy to map the threat, develop capabilities, and counter both the vicious online campaigns by Islamist actors and pro-LTTE elements. As a result, a resolution of the UNHRC, the LTTE proxies have successfully lobbied the legislatures in Ontario, New South Wales, and even in US in 2021. Additionally, online Islamist radicalization continues due to geopolitical scenarios in the region which affects national security. Currently, Sri Lanka is exposed to a new threat with old strategies. Hence, in order to counter the threat of double front information war, first of all, Sri Lanka needs to identify propaganda war as a critical vulnerability and transform its measures from kinetic to non-kinetic. As I always tell, it's never too late. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Jayaratne. I may add, I might say it's better late than never. Anyway, thank you for your thought-provoking presentation. The next paper is on use of visual media by LTTE front organizations to influence post-war Sri Lanka. It's presented by Mr. A. Ariyapperuma. Mr. Ariyapperuma is a fine product of Ananda College, Colombo 10, where he served as the deputy head prefect. Among other officers he held and donned with 5 color insignias and 1 national school's colors. He is a graduate of the General Surgeon Kottala Defense University with a Bachelor of Laws, LLB degree. He was the president of the Moot Court and Debating Society of the university in 2020 and 2019, where he brought glory to the university, representing the country at many international competitions, among those with his team qualifying to the final 40 in the Nuremberg 2021 International Moot Court competition. First and the only university of Sri Lanka to get selected. He is currently an intern research at the Institute of National Security Studies. He is currently in his final year of the Sri Lanka Law College, awaiting to complete his attorney at law examination. The author is currently following a diploma in diplomacy and world affairs at the Bandaranaike International Diplomatic Training Institute and has completed the managerial level of the professional qualifications in human resource management at Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. Now I call upon Mr. Ariyapperuma to make his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Thalpahewa. Am I audible to you, sir?
Yes, you're audible. Thank you.
With the permission of the Honorable Chairperson, the author shall present his presentation. Today, the author will be presenting on the use of visual media by LTTE front organizations to influence post-war Sri Lanka. Starting off with the quick overview of the paper, the author has brought his objectives and the questions by the outline of it, where the paper discusses about the visual media and cognitive radicalization of the youth, radicalization of the second generation LTTE diaspora, the LTTE diaspora's visual media strategies for radicalization and influencing Sri Lanka, existing legal framework of the jurisdictions to counter radicalization, and bringing out the introduction about the topic. The author discusses about the cyber polls and visual propaganda and disinformation and how it affects in terms of radicalization and influence in the country. As you know, after 2009, of 30 years of war, although the ground war of LTTE was over, the cyber wars and specifically on information warfare in terms of hindering the country, these previous cadres have involved with front organizations such as the Global Tamil Forum, Transnational Government of Tamil Eelam, British Tamil Forums. They have been using the cyber force in terms of carrying out cyber hostilities and cyber information warfare in terms of manipulating the international community and also the Sri Lankan community in terms of carrying out their LTTE propaganda. So thereafter, this visual propaganda has been discussed by this paper by the author, where it focuses on how this affects in terms of recruiting teachers and in terms of taking international support and in specifically inciting hatred among the international community and the Tamil youth towards the other ethnic communities in the country. So it focuses on that and provocating emotional and other responses in terms of that to the country and its individuals. And taking these together, they uses the disinformation method in terms of inciting this hatred among these individuals in terms of international law, intentionally and causing misleading information in the cyber in terms of influencing people, where it amounts to radicalization of the individuals by the social psychological factors and in terms of in terms of niches or I think in terms of other factors as well, which they use. The virtual world as a source where internet plays like a main platform in it, where the extremist websites causes in terms of news, articles, and other so on and so forth kind of journals, and where the author also analyzed and brought out how the attractive content in the images and videos has affected in terms of radicalizing the individuals and also the people in terms of international community in terms of influencing the country. So having said that, the author has elaborated the discussion according to three objectives, where the core strands of this paper will be discussed, where the visual media and cognitive radicalization of the youth, where it evolves around the exposure of the viral media, where the perpetrators leaves an imprint on directing involvement of media and cyberspace in perpetrators' radicalization process. It causes in terms of verbal and non-verbal, and also in terms of conjuncting both together, causing of visual signals into the viewers, where it manipulates or make a viewer a sympathizer, or also make the person in the process of radicalizing the individuals, if that is what the radicalization that they or the process that the viewer it's him itself. And it brings out the visual images where the democratic media campaign messaging affects the younger and illiterate audience. It is in contrast of the other factors where they use more than the information, they focuses on the younger and illiterate audience. And in contrast of those two factors, the author brings out the bedroom radicalization rather, which it focuses on the moral disengagement of the individuals, where this moral disengagement affects to these younger individuals, where right now in the second, first, and third generations of these LTTE diaspora people and these generations have been manipulated in terms of how it moral disengagement causes the radicalization of these individuals. In its paper, where the author discusses on radicalization of second generation LTTE diaspora, the author discusses on the evolution of this second generation, where it brings back with these radicalization and also the influence in the minds of the international community, where by the propaganda of the deed, where they focuses on what they are doing, what that was done, and what has to be done by the second generation and third generation is in terms of self-determination, not in terms of terrorism. That's what the brainwashing capacity, that's what they, as how they focuses on to do it. And they justifies these atrocities of the LTTE, which was done as focusing on and saying that he is always in favor, love, and battle of the community, where specifically they conscript the kids as troops and using civilians as shields, which is justified by the teachers in these schools. This was from a sample that was taken by the second generation diaspora as propagandists. So this the author evaluates on this topic moreover in depth to it, and also the author discusses on two-factor growth of evaluation, where these two factors are it affects the race. They use the race as a tool, and they also use embracing the Tamil roots and involvement in politics as a method of radicalizing and influencing Sri Lanka by reiterating and repetitively saying that what has happened in cause of in way of disinformation to the international community. These methods of such as mobilization, evidence of communication, and techniques how the dissemination of radicalization ideologies has been used. These were used, and the author has discussed how it has been used. So finally, in the discussion, the author discusses on the LTT diaspora's visual propaganda and how it affects and influence in terms of influencing the community to Sri Lanka, and also the radicalization, where these strategies were used as psycho-visualization was one of the main strategies, where the repetition of work, the repetitive work of content, music, photos, and other sort of posts where it talks about disinformation, by bring disinformation in the minds of the international community and the youth. And they also, the author has shown how these LTT organizations and front organizations, how they have used European Tamil television networks such as Tamil Television Network, GTV, and Mandram, and in terms of the physical evidences of magazines such as Militant 20 and Militant 30 was used and utilized, and also now being utilized in terms of disseminating this information in a manner which causes hatred and incite hatred in the towards the ethnicities in Sri Lanka, the all Sri Lankans. And the author mainly focuses and findings are being used upon the social media use, where the Facebook, Instagram, Twitter has been utilized as a crucial media platform in terms of inserting such kind of hatred, and also disseminating these information in terms of influencing country, where the international community, these international organizations have been deceived by this information, and all sort of so on and so forth. So author discusses on these three topics, and where it also then brings out how the global solutions, such as existing legal framework, how it affects and how it can be utilized, scrutinized in terms of solving this, where the international law is already in place in terms of sanctioning these kind of activities, where Human Rights Committee opinions, International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, and elimination of racial discrimination, and Johannesburg principles have been used by the international terms. They are all in place, but the effective regularization is not. That is not what we can see. Where the United Kingdom evolves around the tourism, the Terrorism, the Terrorism Act 2000, which evolves around the other certain acts that were enacted, and also in terms of German jurisdiction, where how the German criminal code specifically addresses these kind of such offenses in terms of sanctioning these individuals, where all in all, taking all three together, how we can use in Sri Lanka must be addressed, and where more likely that helps in it with the Prevention of Terrorism Act that is in place is also somewhat similar, addressing all these three together. However, the effective use is not what we can see. The Sri Lanka Press authorities follow the code of professional practice of by the editors along with the Johannesburg principles. If these are being properly used, that can be also sanctioned. Where these, if all these are to be addressed, the implementation is recommended by the author regarding the proactive propaganda detection. The cooperation with extraterritorial jurisdictions is what is one of the most important factor here, because these are not taking place in Sri Lanka, mostly are taking place in other countries, and they exerting force on regulating the universal jurisdiction is also another important factor that recommends. And they also concludes that with the thought that there is a direct existence of nexus between the terrorist visualization techniques and strategies against cognitive radicalization, that which amounts to influencing the post-war Sri Lanka. And that is my take about the author. I would like to acknowledge my institution, the Institute of National Security Studies, the Ministry of Defense, and my gratitude goes towards my mentor, Professor Rohan Gunaratne. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Ariyapperuma, for your presentation. Before we go on to the next presentation, there is a small announcement, because after the next presentation, we will be having a question and answer session. So anyone from the audience or even the presenters have questions, please put it in the chat box. And if you want us to direct it to a particular presenter, please name the presenter or the number. First paper, second paper, third paper, fourth paper, the fifth paper. Like that you direct it. So the next, on the final paper, and once again I do apologize to Mr. Jayathilaka and Ms. Veronika for not giving the introduction at the first paper. This is the second paper they are presenting. It's on effects of digital technologies on health service delivery and quality management in Sri Lankan healthcare systems. Now, Ms. RMS Veronika is a high-end professional accredited from the International Software Testing Qualifications Board as a certified software tester and currently working as a software quality engineer in Pearson Education Global. A professional caliber enshrined with a postgraduate diploma in business management UK and graduated in the discipline of industrial information technology at the Uva Wellas University of Sri Lanka in 2017, and currently reading for Masters in Business Administration, University of Gloucestershire, UK. Pursuing interest in exploring new technologies, conducting research and traveling. Then Mr. Jayathilaka, who did the presentation of the first paper, a military officer with a blend of military, academic and administrative competencies. A professional caliber enshrined with a postgraduate diploma in business management and strategic marketing, Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework, United Kingdom, and graduated in the discipline of management at the Sir John Kothawala Defence University of Sri Lanka in 2018. Graduated from Defence and Staff College Sri Lanka in 2020 and holds Masters in Business Administration from University of Gloucestershire, United Kingdom. Pursuing interest in expanding new technologies, conducting research on the fields of military technology, virtual reality, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and gamification. He holds many international research publications and peer-reviewed journal articles to his credit. The researcher presents on the consecutive third year at the International Research Conference, KDU. Now let me call upon Ms. Veronika to make a presentation.
Thank you, sir. My dear academia and fellow researchers, let me convey my gratitude to the conference chair for the comprehensive introduction about me. Let me present effects of digital technologies on health service delivery and quality management in Sri Lankan healthcare systems to this KDU 14th International Conference. Quality healthcare is a human right of all the people around the world. And this quality has become an increasingly predominant part of human beings. The quality of services, quality products, and specifically high volume health related stakeholders become increasingly important to industry during global pandemic time. The increase of usage of digital platforms, particularly during global pandemic time, redirects Sri Lankans to get adapted into digital platforms. It facilitates general doctors and other stakeholders to get contact to the health services for the citizens in real time. During the COVID-19 global pandemic situation, the usability of digital health facilities increased as a spike. To overcome the problem of reaching doctors physically, if the quality of healthcare services improve, costs are decreased, productivity increase, and better services would be available for clients, which in turn enhances organizational performance and provides long-term working relationships for employees and suppliers. Digital platforms like mobile, web applications, online meetings with doctors have a better quality level of patient satisfaction and its impact on their quality of life. Their safety and the ultimate outcome, like the effectiveness of services, have direct impact by them. Healthcare practices are difficult and complex with its thousands of integrations with all the subsystems. The development of web and mobile-based healthcare systems benefits all medical experts in both developing and advanced countries with innovative levels during this era. Undoubtedly, digital health platforms contribute to improve the quality of every sector in human life. The improvement usage of digital and cloud-based resources in organizations has supported to improve the information level of the patients. Understanding a holistic approach for the improvement of healthcare systems is a must these days. There are fundamental attributes in guaranteeing nations' welfare in improvement of country with the healthcare development. These better quality digital products increase the possibility to result in various ways like enhance healthcare employee morale and rapid development of their mental stability as well as career-related growth. Currently, patients have the ability to get visual view of the health status of their reports by using computers and smart devices. Evidence proposed that the e-health tools used with modern technology have a positive effect on users and their mental, physical health. Thus, users of digital web applications are more trendy into structured and improved supporting abilities and with machine learning behaviors analysis and their outcomes as compared to the traditional way of procedures in the same health facility. According to the World Health Organization, the healthcare sectors and hospitals that use in systematic cloud or data center-based applications in fully automated health systems have been able to reduce organizational operation cost and the other costs associated with the traditional methods. In Sri Lanka, availability of electricity power and internet facilities can enhance social connectivity, social awareness through the various new ways and rapid growth, such as simple method of SMS alerts, television broadcasting, use of popular digital platform applications, enhance information sharing and social connection with the good number of mobile phone usage among Sri Lankan people. Applications such as a basic knowledge e-channeling, basic video conference knowledge, hands-on experience with the reports, document sharing, and monitoring make the task of adoption into e-health facilities fast and more effective with the general public. The basic adoption got increased rapidly due to the ongoing global pandemic situation, which led the authorities to improve the quality of services day by day. Therefore, the scope of the study is to identify the effects of digital technologies on health services delivery in existing systems and areas to be improved in the quality management of Sri Lankan healthcare systems. To answer the research problem of is there any effect on digital health services and quality management in Sri Lankan healthcare systems, researchers found systematic answers for understanding existing knowledge about the digital health facilities of Sri Lankan people via three subcategory sub-areas such as idea of effective, efficient and usefulness of the digital health facilities and the factors to be improved to sustain the quality of digital application and digital services. Above answers directed to identify this study, like evaluation of present digital platform usage and knowledge of people, potential of modern web or mobile applications for health reasons, and quality management aspects regarding use of digital health applications. During COVID-19 situation, online healthcare facilities had revolutionary and remarkable growth compared to last decade. With these changes, the quality of systems and infrastructures has raised problems to be addressed in a systematic way. This research will help to facilitate innovative patient, doctors, other stakeholders, rapid and conversion lead to better care outcomes and communication among them. Conceptual framework was developed to conduct the research with more systematic way with the main independent variable and dependent variables. And since this is an exploratory research, the researcher identifies the relationship or the linkage of identified variables and independent variables like existing computer literacy, existing internet and devices, availability of digital health application, usage of e-health application, time and reliability for the responses. Based on the conceptual framework, the hypothesis built as to ensure further study about digital e-health application positively or negatively impact healthcare systems in Sri Lanka. The population for the proposed study was selected by government and private hospitals distributed in 9 provinces. 385 participants were randomly selected from major hospital departments as mentioned from major units, including outpatient department, inpatient ward services, surgery and maternal services. Data collection was done via the questionnaire, were divided into 3 main sections, where section A, which related to sociogram of random respondents, section B contained the research objectives related to question of study like present usage of digital system in everyday life for healthcare, and the section C was about the estimated potential of e-health for cross-sectoral online patient-physician communication. Here you can see some main idea about presentation of results. Therefore, 51% has installed specific digital applications in their smart devices or laptop, and they install those applications for day-to-day healthcare related systems as mentioned in the figure. These applications were developed by some services providers from private hospitals, network facility providers, and maybe from third-party software companies with the ability to give single sign-on facilities to interconnect the hospitals and the stakeholders. According to the next figure, the majority of participants agree with the method of share medical laboratory reports, X-rays, ECG scan reports via online method. Therefore, they don't want to wait until the reports are released from laboratories and collect them manually. They can access their personal medical account from anywhere when the hospital system release or upload relevant reports to accounts for their personal emails. This is well-known facility used by most of private hospitals in Sri Lanka meantime. Among the participants, 57% of the majority have the willingness to use digital-based information systems instead of traditional healthcare systems for their health-related attributes. This indicates people have the willingness to learn new platforms, discover the fast, reliable accessibility to medical staff for quick advices, reduce the time duration waiting for inspection of medical party in traditional ways by using digital healthcare systems. Among the 385 participants, 80% of the majority has access digital health facility from private hospitals, 70% from government hospitals, and 3% never had these facilities experience in their life. These results indicate that there should be rapid development in the government healthcare systems to engage with information technology and digital media to develop e-healthcare systems for direct engagement with the local public in Sri Lanka for the effectiveness and efficiency of the local public. There is a majority of unsatisfaction among the local public about the existing e-health services in Sri Lanka as described in the figure. Among the participants, there were only 85% participants agree with the existing e-health facilities, and the 30 people had strong satisfactory level about health services. Pearson correlation was considered in the analysis of correlation under this section. The following table shows the correlation of digital tables and digital health facilities with improvement of existing healthcare systems in Sri Lanka. Existing digital platforms are effective than traditional healthcare systems, and the null hypothesis getting rejected and the hypothesis getting proved, another hypothesis positive hypothesis getting proved, and digital e-health applications positively impact healthcare systems in Sri Lanka. Therefore, conclusion related to digital healthcare systems should be designed cautiously considered for large-scale migration and rapid adoption of the changes in Sri Lanka. From the mentioned findings above, this study indicates that significant influence on the current Sri Lanka e-health system based on the resultant findings. Those results include workload reduction among healthcare stakeholders, decreased time consuming or waiting time of patients, and minimalized errors or bugs which engaged with the paper-based manual or traditional records keeping systems. Further, researchers recognize that clients' time spending for searching for misplaced records and files and folders amount decreased because of the unique repository location in cloud or data centers offered by digital healthcare systems. For more details, please find my email below and feel free to email via my email. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Veronika, for interesting presentation. Now we have come to the end of the presentations. Now, like I said, please put your question. Now, this is the question and answer session. So please put your questions in the chat box and the presenters will answer. Now, I think there are one or two questions. Yeah, the first question, I believe it must be addressed to Mr. Ariyapperuma, if I'm not mistaken. The question is, are you thinking that existing legal framework enough to counter LTTE propaganda activity? Since there is review board appointed to review our Terrorism Prevention Act. I believe it's addressed to Mr. Ariyapperuma, or if others want to contribute, please go ahead and contribute.
Yes, I'll take that first. Thank you for the person who asked the question as well. So I believe right now there are laws in place. I believe Prevention of Terrorism Act is more than enough to address these existing terrorist propagandas. However, like how I have pointed out, the effective regulation is not what is there in this case. As more importantly, the extraterritorial implementation is not what we can see right now. That has been the issue. So if this extraterritorial jurisdiction is being implemented, I believe there is a full implementation of Prevention of Terrorism Act. However, now there is another counterterrorism bill has been presented to the parliament, but it is still under the order paper, but however it has not been presented for voting. So I believe this current act is being reviewed rather in terms of bringing this counterterrorism bill. But however, it addresses everything, but curtailing these powers would also hinder. But I must also acknowledge that there are certain loopholes, and also there are certain detrimental causes in terms of human rights violation, as how they interpret it in terms of this, which has caused such problems. So I believe I have answered that question. So.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ariyapperuma. There's another question for you. I will ask from you in a little while. Then there are two questions addressed to Ms. Sinduja. If I may, I will give both together. First question is, what is misinformation and disinformation? I believe he has made a mistake and said discrimination. So he's asking, what is misinformation and disinformation? That's the first question. Then Ms. Sinduja's second question addressed to you is, what are the recommended countermeasures against propaganda warfare? Those are the two questions. Do you want me to repeat it, or you can see it in the chat box as well?
I can see
Ms.
it.
Sinduja?
I can see it from the chat box. And
right.
thank you very
Okay.
much. Yeah. Okay. To answer the first question, I would say there's a specific difference between misinformation and disinformation. So, disinformation is about false information which is intended to mislead, especially propaganda issued by a government organization to a rival power or the media. But when it comes to misinformation, that is about like false or inaccurate information, especially that which is deliberately intended to deliver and harm somebody. So that is the difference between disinformation and misinformation. And answering to the second question, okay, that is about recommended countermeasures against propaganda war. Well, first of all, I would like to emphasize saying that if you want to have countermeasures, first of all, you have to identify the threat as a threat. So, if you don't identify propaganda war as a critical vulnerability, as I mentioned, then the countermeasures will not be articulated accordingly. So, it is a must that you actually, like when we study especially national security, as I mentioned, there are three different elements, that is critical vulnerability, critical capability, and critical requirements. So, in that case, if you don't see the threat as it is, then you will not be able to articulate it. But having said that, now if we are to recommend any sort of countermeasures against propaganda war, I would say we should now. There were instances where banning of in certain occasions, as if I recall, especially during the Digana incident, there was this kind of a blackout which happened in the Facebook, where Facebook was a kind of, you know, it was halted for a period of time, but I don't see it as a recommended countermeasure. But if you want to like go above, the best thing that you can do is to actually accommodate a proper policy for propaganda war. Now, in certain cases where like places like Singapore, places like especially Israel, they do this, they actually have specific countermeasures which have been taken for propaganda war, such as like if you actually put something on the internet, there are mechanisms specially available in the intelligence systems to detect it. Now, that is actually kind of advanced intelligence, strategic intelligence that I'm talking about, but that is the case when it comes to propaganda war. And also, one countermeasure that I can suggest is to develop some kind of virtual personas, because it is happening around the world, especially when it comes to intelligence agencies. But that also have to incorporate with the strategy that you're building up. So you can't just make virtual personas and say, hey, look here, let's counter this. You can't do that. So if you are actually having a virtual persona, that means you have to groom the person, maybe for 1 year, maybe for 2 years. Sometimes it takes even longer period of times, depending on the individual. So in that case, I would suggest, yes, to have proper virtual personas applied in the intelligence setup, especially to counter this threat. But that has to be part of the strategy, or that has to be part of the framework or the counter policy that we are talking about. Counter, like virtual personas itself is not going to solve the problem only. So in that case, you need to know, you need to first of all understand the propaganda war as a threat to national security, and then go for the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sinduja. Are there any more questions? I don't see any other question in the chat box. If you do have, we have a bit more time. Please do send the questions. Yes.
Chair,
Do I hear
I
it?
think there is one more question to Mr.
Ariyapperuma. Sorry, I mentioned the question, Mr. Ariyapperuma, I have missed it. Thank you. That is, what is the effect of the LTT diaspora's visual media propaganda on post-war conflict in Sri Lanka?
Okay, thank you, sir. I believe right now, so during my study, I had to go through a lot of websites, more into, and also the social media content. So, moreover, if I start with this YouTube, if I take YouTube, but I do not want to mention any of those persons or the organizations who masquerade as human rights activists or the organizations but work behind as a LTT front organization, so that I do not want to mention the names. So these are, in terms of YouTube platform, we have seen many visuals in terms of visuals such as music, and also in terms of documentary, where they portray a false manifestation of such certain kind of allegations, where this amounts to a wider distribution of information. This is the information warfare that they have created, where the social media, the hashtag campaigns they have used. If we take 12 months of a year, each month they have a certain kind of a unique hashtag or a unique kind of a campaign in terms of the events that they have portrayed. So by these, the wide dissemination of information has caused during these past 10 to 12 years, where these information that has been pivotal, and one of the most important information which this information that have been considered as disinformation has been used by these organizations, where the international community right now and during the course of time have influenced and has been manipulated, where they have been influencing Sri Lanka, where Sri Lanka has lost GSP Plus, and Sri Lanka has lost certain kind of other opportunities in the world, and these frontline organizations are focusing on making Sri Lanka as a zero economic country. But during their videos, that what we see from these social media videos, they actually campaign in terms of prohibiting the products from Sri Lanka being bought by the other international communities. So, and also making allegations where, from the human rights perspective, bringing the resolutions against Sri Lanka. We have seen such kind of influence, and always the Sri Lanka government has been trying to countering it and successfully counter certain kind of these allegations. But however, we must, as a country, if we are looking forward, we must seek kind of collaborated effort in terms of countering these kind of information, where they have LTT rather have these LTT organizations have rather been very successful in terms of tarnishing the image of the country, but still we are countering it. We are being able to counter it, and however we need to develop it in terms of information warfare in the cyber domain, where the cyber domain is one of the main sources where these information being disseminated to wide audiences, and also being disinformation being used as a manipulation tool, where these non-verbal and verbal communications by these YouTube channels, where these music, certain artists are being using in terms of poems and dramas, and also the music, especially according to the second generation needs. Youth, the current youth, is not using the conventional communication methods, but they are rather focusing on the upcoming generation according to the likes and dislikes. They consider those things of the new generation, where they address these kind of things using that strengths that they have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ariyapperuma. Any other questions? I don't see any questions from the chat box. Any questions? Please put it in the chat, but we have a few more minutes, so we can take a couple of more questions before we wind up the session. In the meantime, can I pose a question? Keep the session going and make it a bit interesting. Is it okay if I pose a question from the first and the second presenters on use of technology and artificial intelligence? My question is what I...
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, the question I'm asking is the points upon I gave at my opening remarks. Are we putting all eggs in one basket? The reason why I'm asking this question is, now, you know what has happened to the so-called sophisticated armies. US pulled out of Afghanistan, even Russia had to pull out of Afghanistan, they had to pull out of Iraq. But our Sri Lankan army, with use of less technology, have been very successful. So then are we putting more emphasis on the technology? I'm not telling technology is not good, just to get your thoughts. And the second part, what I'm asking this question is, again, use of technology. We are a user. We are not the ones who create the technology. So we have to rely on somebody else. Then there'll be some kind of a dependency syndrome. We have to rely on somebody else, an external person. So how do you see it as a security threat when we have to rely on some outsider? Or in other words, other side of the, can we develop our own technology? And on the health issue also, if I may ask something, now all this using of technology is supposed to give the service delivery and quality in the health service. Yes, the new normal, yes, we are looking at that and we are experiencing that. But in the rural sector, where a lot of our rural hospitals, our rural village folks, or the people, the larger population live in the rural areas, that actually can be a problem. So how do you see addressing that issue? Those are for the first and second presenters and the last presenter. You all can keep it brief, just to get some thoughts.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to address that fact of homegrown artificial intelligence, if I may, that bases on my topic. So addressing on the fact, nations, as you correctly mentioned, nations who have been using artificial intelligence, like the USA, Russia, the United Kingdom, China specifically, had certain shortcomings in artificial intelligence. But that does not necessarily mean, they have not suspended the use of artificial intelligence. During the study, in my personal study, I have found several countries which have had shortcomings. Even their artificial intelligence protocols or mechanisms have been overseen by certain entities that have posed threats to their national security spaces. For an instance, it is suspected that China had developed an artificial intelligence mechanism that could be weaponized, as in the first presenter had proposed correctly. Artificial intelligence could be militarized, but that does not mean that we cannot have a homegrown system. Now, Sri Lanka, as we know, have several mechanisms. Now, for an instance, the Department of Immigration have a homegrown system, and also several other entities have homegrown systems. We have the human capacity, we have the intellect, we have the capacity to build it here in Sri Lanka. So I thoroughly doubt that there is no room for us to depend on a technologically advanced nation, or else to depend on certain creators, since we have the capacity to create. And also, I think it is prudent for us to start now itself, because Sri Lanka is on the verge of moving on to a digital era. All of our systems are digitizing. Almost all of our databases are now being converted onto digital platforms. So we are in the early stages. If we implement this now, there is a high probability that we would not fail, but it would not give us the advantage that certain developed countries have already. But it would give us a certain advantage in the future as we are developing, and we would know our own homegrown AIs from the ground level up. So we would not have any troubleshooting, or else mitigating a threat, or else understanding what would come in our way as a predictive threat. And we would be able to develop a successful counter mechanism in cyber warfare and also in recognizing threat. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perera.
And adding some complementary expressions to whatever Mr. Perera brought in. So likewise, winning the real war in Sri Lankan soil. So when it comes to the winning the real war in Sri Lankan soil, the real war as well as the ideal war should be balanced. So as the Sri Lankan military, we have to always rely on the traditional military tactics that we are taking ahead, as well as the digital innovations like whatever I presented, like virtual reality military subsection in the military forms, like we have to preserve our own way of freedom of action by catering the military innovations and creating a subsection in the virtual military force. So likewise, the Middle Kingdom, currently they are controlling the social norms and technological interpretations and giving the freedom of the social, cultural and the economical values of the society. So they can control their society by demarcating, by using the virtual military assets or the weapon bundles. So in coming into the action of blending this kinetic energy and the virtual energy in projecting the military force or the power projection into the competitive advantage over the other states. So we have to acknowledge the balance of mixing of these two technologies, the traditional way of applying the combat force as well as the military and the technological advancement, how we are going to balance these two structures. Otherwise, as militaries and the national stability and development and security in that concern, we will be failing if we don't balance these two technological advancements in military as well as in digitally and technology.
Thank you, Mr. Jayathilaka.
This is regarding what Mr. Chanaka raised about digital health facilities. Yes, I agree with the statement of rural areas do have challenges with engaging digital platforms where that related to not only health as well as the educational platforms these days. But for my opinion is that we have main strength like the electricity coverage all over the island as well as the mobile phone usage percentage. As comparing to the statistics all over the island, we have the electricity power as well as at least one family member do have mobile phone usage. But in the rural hospitals, they do not have video conferencing or at least file uploading systems with the rural hospitals as well as most of the government hospitals. What we have to do as public and private sectors, we have to develop some kind of centralized hospital system to each and every hospital and do give basic knowledge of how to do a video conferencing with the village people as well as at least for the young children who live in the rural area, because of this pandemic situation, they know how to get engaged with online applications via Teams, Zoom, like that. So we can adhere that technology to the hospital systems as well. So I think regardless of rural and developed areas, we have to have continuous rapid growth in these areas to develop some kind of enhancement in the technology. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Veronika. One last call. Any other questions? We can take one more question. Looks like there are no more questions. So let me thank the presenters. All 5 papers discuss national security looking from different angles, from the different prisms, which I would say are very important, though they are non-traditional way of looking at it, very important and critical. I think the first paper, if you just look back, the first presenters, there were 2 presenters basically who had done the paper. They had a novel interpretation for building a virtual military force, not only for national security, but for stability and the development of Sri Lanka. In the answer session also, Mr. Jayathilaka emphasized how it should be balanced, because Sri Lanka is a good example. I would always emphasize on it that we had a very good military with less technology, but still, we certainly appreciate what he says, that we have to have a fine balance where they both are complementing each other. Then in the second presentation, Mr. Perera has emphasized the importance of artificial intelligence. Though we are in the elementary or the embryonic stage of using certain kind of AI in our systems, he has highlighted that it's very important. And of course, he also highlighted that the shortcoming or that the doubt in the human mind cannot be replaced by artificial intelligence, but a suitable replacement for human threat recognition can be given. And in the answer session also, he clarified that best is to have a homegrown bottoms-up type of approach to this. Then the third and the fourth papers both discussed, third paper discussed on the dual threat of LTTE and ISIS, and the fourth paper discussed more towards the LTTE threat in terms of misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda warfare. So that is something I think we should focus on. That is something, though we won the military war, we are losing the propaganda war. That's a common perception. So these are very thought-provoking presentations. And the fifth paper was very timely because pandemic has become again a non-traditional security threat end of the day. So it has looked at the use of technology for service delivery and quality management. Of course, Sri Lanka boasts of a very good healthcare system. So the next stage, it will be a quantum leap if we can implement these things. And in the question and answer session, Ms. Veronika also clarified that because the electricity, basically access to electricity is quite high in the country, and I personally know access to mobile phones are very high with even the lowest strata of the society, very, very high. Because I'm just telling Pampi, I don't even use a smartphone, but all these domestic helper, they have 2-3 smartphones. So that way, we should go to the next level. So very interesting presentations. Now the issues have been raised and analyzed and discussed, and suggestions have been made, recommendations proposed. So now the ball is in the court of the policymakers and the decision makers to act on it. So that is beyond our control. So we have done our part. So I take this opportunity to congratulate and thank the presenters, the audience, and also the Strategic Studies Department headed by dynamic Dr. Harendra Vidanage, and the Kotalara Defense University headed by, I would say, the visionary Vice Chancellor, Major General Bilinda Peris, for organizing this event and continuing to head for the 14th successive year. Now I will hand over, and also last but not least, please pardon me, I like to thank Brigadier Rajapaksa for being an integral part of the proceedings. I think last year also we shared the same session, if I'm not mistaken. So I will hand over the mic to Brigadier Rajapaksa, and I will thank you all once again and wish you all the very best in your academic pursuits, and also keep safe. Things are not the greatest in the country right now.
Thank you very much,
Thank you, sir.
Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I am sure our audience will agree with me that this was a fruitful session, as the authors have presented a variety of perspectives on the conference theme. I would like to once again thank the chairperson, Dr. Chanaka Thalpahewa, for taking time off in his busy schedule to attend the 14th International Research Conference. I would like to express my gratitude to the writers who spoke at the 4th technical session for Defense and Strategic Studies. Authors for this session are Major Chandana Jayathilaka, RMS Veronika, BJ Perera, SUW Jayaratne, Ariyapperuma for their contribution under the theme Techno-Strategic Studies. Now, I would like to call upon Brigadier R.G.O. Rajapaksha, RSP, PSc, Dean, Faculty of Graduate Studies, to present the Certificate of Participation to Ms. SUW Jayaratne. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, we conclude the fourth and final session for Defense and Strategic Studies for the 14th International Research Conference.